Episode 244, 5 years in. This is the Change Underground for the week ending 1st of February 2021. Hello, I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. A little foreshadowing, as they say in the trade. Have a partnership sort of announcement coming in the next few weeks. They're currently dealing with a small tech issue, as we all do from time to time. And the fit is great. The people are wonderful and their vision truly inspiring. But more when we have our link set up and the venture is visible, so something to look forward to. And a big shout out to Dan in Switzerland for his duck-based questions. Feedback is always welcome. You can feel like you're talking into the void sometimes as a podcaster on your own. So it's always nice to know that there's someone out there listening. Way back on the 1st of February 2016, this podcast feed hit the interwebs. Yep, that's 5 years ago. About 12 months ago, I had some doubts about carrying on with the podcast, and a quick chat with Mrs. World Organic News convinced me there was more to do. During those 12 months, I realised a name change was needed to better reflect the material I was presenting. And now, as Mrs. Change Underground, she reminded me of my doubts last year. Who was to know then what 2020 had to bring? Certainly there were clues, and we have seen those who took the virus seriously and early fared best. How the vaccine rollout in the face of an evolving virus will determine how soon we return to whatever will pass for normal. As a species, we have dodged a bullet in many ways. The lethality and transmission rates have been relatively low when compared to other pandemics. 30 to 70% mortality rates for the Black Death and a 50% death rate for Hendra virus. Not many of my non-Australian listeners will have heard of Hendra, nor did it become a pandemic disease, but it is a horrible virus. It's named for the suburb of Hendra where it was first diagnosed. It's endemic in native flying foxes, a type of fruit-eating bat. And it's always good to see a bat connection, eh? This virus, though, needs to travel through a horse to get to people, and the horse gets quite ill. So in this case, it is the veterinarians who are most at risk. On the whole, though, with SARS-CoV-2, we've got lucky. But wow, the suffering this virus has caused should be sufficient for all of humanity to take these things seriously. And it has highlighted some significant defects in our food systems. These will become clearer as time goes by. The toilet paper nonsense early last year is being replaced by, at present, small but growing shortages in fresh fruit and vegetables. There's not much between us in Tassie and Antarctica to give you some idea of our location, and yet the only oranges available in our supermarkets are being shipped from sunny California. We only discovered this when we started click and collect purchasing of our groceries. These are picked by staff in the supermarket, and we'd have gone without rather than encourage the transport of oranges halfway around the world. Equally, they were pretty average oranges, funnily enough, having travelled that far, and clearly they'd been in storage for a very long time. Half developed black discoloration and then mould within 3 days of purchase. So in the future, we'll be sticking to our strawberries, raspberries, and soon to be available blackberries. In another month, apples will hit the menu, and all these are within 50 metres of the kitchen, which is a far cry from California. Our food systems, as a rule of thumb, need to be shortened. Food grown, where possible, as close as possible to the people who eat it. I understand the wheat belts of the world will still exist, but there are many foodstuffs we can grow close to where they are consumed. And I reckon we can grow a large amount of cereals close by too. Every village worth its name in the Middle Ages had its own grain mill, and that's because grains were grown locally, and we are now in a position to avoid local famines following localised crop failures, with transport and wheat, corn, rice belts to cover the down periods. I think this movement to shorter supply lines is a trend we will see extended over the next few years. with more people producing at least some of their own food. Now, looking back to episode 1, here's a quote. Quote, "It is time to move our food production onto a more sensible footing. Food production based upon the needs of both our health and the health of the soil. We've just come out of the International Year of Soils, that was 2015. Soils we all depend on. A thin layer between the bedrock and the air is what feeds us. That thin layer and the fact that it rains on Earth is the reason we have food to eat. We must move away from the oil and poison-based food systems for our good and the good of the soil. To do this, we don't need to live like medieval peasants grubbing in the dirt to create a tiny surplus. We don't need to fear the spectre of famine. Humanity has developed better ways of growing food, ways which do not include poison, do not require cross-species creations, and that do not use more calories of energy to grow than they produce. We need to take the machinery out of food production and put more people into it. We need to shorten our supply lines, to move from monocultures of corn and soybean to localised polycultures of vegetables, fruit, meat and fish." End quote. So there you go. Particularly, we must move away from oil and poison-based food systems for our good and the good of our soil. It's the bit that jumped out at me this time round. And during the last 5 years since that was published, Monsanto has been successfully prosecuted in civil courts in the US, and many countries are starting to roll back glyphosate, which is the key ingredient in Roundup, which was made by Monsanto. And I now live in hope of it being banned completely in my lifetime. Adding it to the list of DDT, 2,4,5-T and the organochlorines and organophosphates as ideas that should never have seen the light of day and are now banned. So to paraphrase these last 5 years, grow food at home, share it with your friends, family and community. Grow it in the no-dig way and you'll be sequestering carbon. Be kind to the soil, keep it covered and it'll love you back with produce that's just like Grandpa used to grow. And while we and others are growing our food in our no-dig gardenings, we will be decarbonising the air and recarbonising the soil. Thank you all for listening for part or all of these 5 full yet really quickly passing years, and I'll be back next week.